there can be no real peace while one American is dying someplace in the world for the rest of us.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Many people live in the United States, but only 45 men have ever been declared the leader of this country. While being elected President of the United States is a high honor, it also comes with the burden of public scrutiny. Your legacy will be cemented in the actions that you take, the decisions that you make, and the results that stem from those decisions. Today, we'll be observing the most iconic of those who have occupied the White House since our founding. George Washington. The father of our country was an obvious choice for our first president. Not only was he the lead general of the Revolutionary War, but he was a man adored by the American public. Washington's presidency was spent setting the precedent of the office that is still adhered to today. A bipartisan and passive leader, he did the best job he could have, keeping our post-revolutionary country calm and intact. His farewell address to the nation is one of the finest historical speeches of all time.
And that, after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be to the mansions of rest.
Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson is more famous for what he did before he was president than what he did during his presidency. The author of the Declaration of Independence and the ambassador to France during the Revolutionary War, Jefferson was rewarded with the position of Secretary of State by George Washington for his expertise in foreign affairs. As president, he furthered his accomplishments by negotiating the Louisiana Purchase, which expanded United States territory west of the Mississippi River. He was truly a mastermind of foreign policy. James Madison. Vice President and successor of Thomas Jefferson, President Madison was previously famous for authoring 29 of the Federalist Papers in support of the United States Constitution, a set of the finest writings in American history. Madison was also the first president to declare war against another country when he entered the United States into the War of 1812.
Give me liberty or a bran muffin!
One of Madison's weak spots was the infamous Supreme Court decision of Marbury versus Madison from his vice presidency. Jefferson had ordered Madison not to deliver the commissions from the midnight appointments of John Adams, but the Supreme Court ruled Madison's compliance with Jefferson's order unconstitutional and established the power of the judiciary to strike down unconstitutional laws and regulation. Andrew Jackson. Initially slighted by the Electoral College vote in 1825, Andrew Jackson eventually took office in 1929. Jackson was the first president to have an attempted assassination on his life, and even went so far as to, yes, you're hearing this right, beat his attempted assailant with his walking cane for the crime.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight,
President Jackson is criticized for his handling of the nullification crisis, in which he actively threatened military action against South Carolina in support of a tariff the state opposed. While a remedy was found to prevent a civil war, the damage between South Carolina and the federal government was just beginning. James Buchanan. Arguably the worst president in American history, Buchanan did more to lead the United States into a bloody war than to prevent one. Buchanan was very supportive of the Southern Democrats and their ambition of slavery for economic profit. He actively pushed for the Dred Scott decision, which denied African Americans citizenship in the United States. Because of his actions, thousands of Americans lost their lives in the Civil War. He lost re-election in 1860, and it was the greatest thing that could have happened to America at the time. Abraham Lincoln. From arguably the worst president to the greatest, Abraham Lincoln led the United States through the Civil War and effectively eliminated slavery. His legacy as Honest Abe gave the appearance of a wise and moral leader. His most famous moment of all was his speech following the Battle of Gettysburg, the bloodiest of all the battles fought between the Union and Confederate armies. Lincoln was the first president to be assassinated as John Wilkes Booth shot him at Ford Theater in 1865 after Lincoln had won re-election. His legacy has been celebrated throughout our history, and an iconic monument of him remains in Washington, D.C. Theodore Roosevelt. Self-providing himself the nickname Bull Moose, Theodore Roosevelt started off the 20th century with a bang. The youngest to ever occupy the White House, Teddy was quite popular amongst Americans as he kept in close contact with the people. Yet his politics were top-notch. His most notable accomplishment was preserving American forests and wildlife, as well as the natural resources that went with it. He is an iconic president, which is why his face rests on Mount Rushmore. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A distant cousin of Teddy Roosevelt, FDR was the longest-serving president of all time. They passed a constitutional amendment in order to limit a president's total tenure in office after he passed away. FDR was iconic because he created a lot of government programs that still exist today. From expanding bureaucracy to promoting welfare, FDR created a system that has lasted for over 90 years. He's also quite famous for his leadership during the thick of things in World War II. His famous Day of Infamy speech after the Pearl Harbor attacks were a chilling warning to the Nazis that they'd messed with the wrong president and the wrong country. FDR and his wife Eleanor were probably the most iconic couple to ever live in the White House. His wife later became an ambassador following her husband's death and the end of his presidency. John F. Kennedy. One of the most beloved presidents, Kennedy's assassination during his first term shocked the nation. However, his assassination holds a significant place in history for the conspiracies that surround it. Many things all happening at the same time made the public stir on the idea that bigger things were going on behind the scenes. While we'll never know what really happened, we lost a worthy leader in John Kennedy. Richard Nixon. Name a president that has ever been in more trouble than President Nixon.
What?
Before you say Donald Trump, let me remind you that the evidence surrounding the break-in at Watergate created bipartisan support for impeachment that forced Nixon to resign as president. He was the first and only president to be forced out of office because of a scandal. Ronald Reagan. One of the oldest and most popular presidents of all time, President Reagan went from motion pictures to the White House in the blink of an eye. Originally a Democrat, Ronald Reagan created a new form of Republican in the United States that still has a strong backing today. Lots of people from both sides of the aisle saw Reagan as the great leader that America needed, which is why his elections were routinely blowouts. He is probably best known as a speaker. An orator of all orators, he captivated audiences with his thunderous sayings and enthusiastic stories. Listening to him was a privilege, not a curse. He also had a great sense of humor, which made him even more popular.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Barack Obama. Obama broke barriers when he became the first African-American president in American history. President Obama made a swift name for himself through his decisions regarding healthcare and international politics. Mixed partisan acceptance of Obamacare and the Iran nuclear deal stained the Obama administration. But President Obama's most famous act was hunting down and killing al-Qaeda leader and murderer of thousands of Americans, Osama bin Laden.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
President Obama's professionalism and light-hearted personality make him a popular character amongst the American population. Like Ronald Reagan, President Obama is a great orator and has a great sense of humor. He was the type of person who could run a country.
Vice President Biden, Vice President. That was a joke.
If you like this video, could you do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons? Don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. Also, if you could check out theissuepack.com and follow me on X and Instagram, I would really appreciate it. Have a great day, America.